Well, hello. It's just me today, and I want to talk about the number of people Elon Musk has killed, over 100,000 children recently. And it is today is Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025. So I guess I'll start with that. This is, I think, a New York Times article. It leads to this one. Uh, yeah, and they're just pointing out the legacy of Elon Musk uh, and Doge. And the most significant thing they did from a world health perspective is destroy USAID. And the lack of USAID has already resulted in 300,000 deaths, most of them children. So that's an impressive legacy that puts Elon Musk among the largest slaughterers of humans in history, although there are others. I'll talk about a few of them here. Um, and so Elon Musk denies all of this completely because he doesn't get any of his facts from actual science or reputable news sources. He gets his information from conspiracy theorists on X. Um, and that is logical, I suppose, because like Donald Trump, he doesn't care about the truth. He cares about public appearance because um, he makes his living by being popular. I mentioned before, Tesla sells at 10 to 20 times its actual valuation as a car company just because he is famous. And like any other celebrity, like, for example, Taylor Swift, who is not a monster like him, but she is in the same business of just being in the public limelight, like an entertainer, like Jimmy Kimmel and Donald Trump. Elon Musk and Donald Trump just get headlines. They're creatures of the media, and they're real job is to stay in the news and make sure there's a headline every few days about them, and their wealth comes from fame. So it doesn't matter to Elon Musk or Donald Trump what the truth is because they don't actually care about policies or the consequences on the American people of what they do. What they care about is making themselves more famous. Um, all right. And so you wonder why Elon Musk hates USAID. He calls them a radical left political psyop and the most gigantic global terror organization in history. And he told Joe Rogan the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, referring to the emotion as a bug in our system. And he often talks about the woke mind virus. So I found a clue in a podcast where Rick Wilson said the real reason Elon Musk hates USAID is because they opposed apartheid in South Africa. And Elon Musk came from South Africa in the time of apartheid and left before apartheid ended with his family. So and that's his eugenics position that leads to his large number of children and his bizarre names of his children. It's all part of he believes that he is the superior race and that all other people are inferior, and he should populate the earth and rule the earth, and other people are non-player characters that should just be trampled underfoot, which, by the way, is a very common belief down through history. Nobility are superiors. The commoners are just like herd animals for them to exploit and slaughter and use as they wish for their own glory, and that is not any form of crime. That is the natural order of things, like humans killing lesser animals and eating them. The nobles should just slaughter the peasants and use them um, to further their own glory. Very different than, say, the biblical precept that says the king is the servant of all and that the purpose of the ruler is to take care of the people, although they will say that is taking care of the people by putting them in their proper place where they will be happiest, like your farm animals that you take care of until it's time to slaughter them. They should just understand that it is their role in life to serve their betters and not complain about it. Um, and that's been a very popular idea throughout human history. Now, America was founded to subvert this and have no kings, but Elon Musk and Donald Trump never got the memo. So I was interested to look into this, and I found an interesting article, I think from the Atlantic, talking about USAID's role in apartheid South Africa. And I was alive at this time, but I wasn't paying enough attention to this. I didn't know this. Ronald Reagan passed a comprehensive anti-apartheid act, and he vetoed the Anti-Apartheid Act, and Congress overrode the veto, and then sent U.S. Officials to South Africa to promote the end of apartheid. And U.S. aid was a big part of that. They came into South Africa. They worked with local African leaders, local leaders of the black community. They interacted with them to help apartheid get overthrown. And that's why Elon Musk regards them as a terrorist organization that destroyed the system that he regards as correct. So, now we're under Nazi rule. Elon Musk is a Nazi. Uh, Steve Bannon is a Nazi. And Donald Trump is completely happy to be supported by Nazis. I don't think he actually has any ideology at all. He just does whatever will bring him more power, and he certainly understands that Nazis are a large part of his base, and by promoting Nazi policies, he will uh, achieve his success. So that's where we are. Anyway, so Elon Musk killed something more than 150, 200,000 children so far. So to compare him with previous people, you can compare him, for example, to Donald Trump in his first administration. And the analysis after the fact in 2021 said that 470,000 Americans died at that point from coronavirus. 40% of them were unnecessary and caused by Trump's policies. So that's about 188,000. So I'd say Elon Musk has managed to kill more people than Donald Trump, although Donald Trump might have done other things. And so anyway, well, another way to look at it is Donald Trump is succeeding in his second administration at killing people far faster than he did the first time. And that probably counts as a success from his point of view. So in similar policies, RFK's fluoride ban can be expected to ruin 25 million kids' teeth and cost about $10 billion. If it spreads, it's already in 2 or 3 states and spreading through the red states quickly, banning fluoride so the kids will have more cavities. And so Trump has announced a executive order that we should have gold standard science. And analyzing it, what this is political appointees will decide what counts as quality evidence and what does not in scientific enterprises. Now, the scientific community has come up against this, of course, because if you go back to, say, time of Galileo, who was imprisoned for suggesting that the Earth goes around the sun instead of vice versa, by the church, scientists have often felt like political and religious organizations should not be determining what the truth of the world is, but scientists should through objective and verifiable methods. But this is not what characters like Trump like at all. And so looking in history, I came across a story that my father, a geneticist, told me when I was young. I looked it up and put an article here about it, about Lysenko, an example of what Trump wants when the politicians rule science. Lysenko is interesting. He probably killed more human beings than any individual scientist in history. What he did was he applied Marxist political philosophy to genetics. And instead of saying that his interpretation of Marxist philosophy is that breeding doesn't matter. All that matters is the environment. So he decided that if you wanted to grow crops that could be raised in a cold climate, all you had to do was subject some seeds to a cold climate so they had that experience, and that would educate the crops to sprout at other times. So this led to an incredible famine, which killed, I think, 7 million people, the Soviet famine of 1930 to 1933. And there were other reasons why that happened, as Stalin pushed other policies. But the fake science was a considerable part of it. All right. Anyway, Tulsi Gabbard is, I guess she's a national security advisor or something of that sort now. And she wants to challenge Trump to pay attention to his national security briefing, which he doesn't. Um, and so the latest plan is to make it into a video like a Fox News segment, perhaps delivered by real Fox anchors. Now, I'll be interested to see if this works. I think this will not work. I think this comes from misunderstanding Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, they announced in his first term, they said he doesn't read anything and he doesn't listen to anything. The only thing he wants to see is TV news. And if you want to give him a reading piece of paper, you have to have only like 5 or 6 bullet points, and you have to have his name on the bullet points. It has to be talking about him, or he doesn't care. Couldn't care less about a military analysis or scientific analysis or anything. Now, and they said this is just because he's a narcissist and he only cares about himself. And you could say that, but I think the point is he is a celebrity. And like I say, like Elon Musk, he knows that what matters is his public appearance. He is he doesn't care about the truth. He cares about how he looks on TV, and he's made it very clear. He hired all of his cabinet officials based on how they look on TV. He's casting a reality TV show and performing a reality TV show. So I think Tulsi Gabbard is off track here. I think if you made a private national security briefing that looked just like a Fox News segment, Trump would not care because I don't think he cares about the way the material is presented. He cares about how he looks on TV. So he wouldn't care about anything that is not in fact being published openly on TV. And I think you'll find that if you made Fox News segments for the confidential national security briefing, Donald Trump's only comment would be, that's a good one. Put it on real Fox News so everybody can see it. Because he doesn't care about national security and he doesn't understand confidentiality. That's when you show him anything, he's like a Hollywood producer. He just thinks about how could I use this in my next episode. He's not understanding the point that you need to actually protect the people and protect the nation. He's just seeing everything as a spectacle. I remember I was frustrated by movies, big budget summer blockbusters, and I saw interviews with the directors, and I cared about things like the science behind the science fiction and the plot and such. And they said, no, all we did is I thought about a scene where I wanted to have the whole building collapsing and they're running around and saving each other as the blocks fall on them. And then this other scene where the giant rocket takes off and they're shooting lasers. I had these spectacular scenes, and then you just want to tie some plot to tie those scenes together. And they understood, I think, better what most movie watchers want to see. They just want to see one memorable scene with spectacular special effects, and they don't really notice or care about the plot or things that tie those scenes together. And Trump, I think, is that way. Anyway, we'll see. Uh, I think this is an easy mistake to make. You think that somebody who's the president of the United States would actually care about the fate of the United States and policy and taking care of the people and taking care of the economy and all that. And I think they just don't understand what he cares about is making a public spectacle. He's the world's greatest reality TV star. He just wants to make a show. I got a cold. Anyway, so in that spirit, Trump has been pardoning people. It's blatantly obvious that most of the pardons are just bought and sold. Rudolph Giuliani told people that he could get a pardon for $2 million for anybody. He would keep 1 million and pass the other 1 million on to Trump. And that seems to be the going rate. But he's not completely motivated directly by money. Like I say, he will do a pardon if he thinks it'll make a good TV spot and increase his fame. So he's considering pardoning Diddy. And I don't know anything about rap stars or anything. I just see the headlines go by. Diddy apparently is one of these revolting music celebrities that was just drugging and raping people like crazy. So apparently he's committed tons of rapes and other horrible crimes. So it is appalling that anybody would think of pardoning him. But 50 Cent says he's going to call Trump and try to stop him from pardoning him. So we'll see. And he'll decide which one of these I think would get him better headlines. All right. And Joni Ernst is hitting the news because she's the governor of Iowa, I think. But she tried to explain, she held a town hall, which a Republican top officials have told Republicans to stop holding town halls because when they face their actual voters and constituents, it's a disaster. But she did. And they said, if you kick people off Medicaid, it's going to cause people to die. She said, well, everybody's going to die anyway, which is not a very great answer. And then she made a video afterwards sneering at her constituents and saying, you know, I thought everybody knew we're going to die. Maybe you believe in the tooth fairy. If you want to live, you have to actually worship Jesus Christ to live forever. So the idea that you could actually have medical care and that it would prolong your life and that would be a valuable thing, she sneers at as completely stupid. So she doesn't apply that to her own family, though, or herself, I think. So it's a spectacularly outrageous thing to say, and possibly her voters will actually punish her for it. But I think more likely in red states, they will just distract people with talk about the one transgender girl in sports, and that'll supersede any trivial consideration of actual health or life. Anyway, so on June 14th, there's going to be a big protest. No kings, I highly recommend everybody to go out and protest if you're not happy with the Nazi regime killing us all, uh, which I'm not happy with. And I think, like I say, political scientists say we have to get a few more people out protesting in order to really have large effect. So it would be very good to go out on Saturday, June 14th, about 10 days away from now. And Donald Trump shared a conspiracy that Biden was executed in 2020 and replaced by clones, doubles, and robots. Um, so there's that. And I'm pretty old. I'm old enough to remember when the United States government would make statements and the president would make statements, and they were considered as having some value and some general background and truth to them, and not like laughable pronouncements from, say, the North Korean press secretary just making up complete lies. Um, Younger people probably don't remember in America where that was ever true. But believe me, there was a time when the statements that came from the president were about as good as statements you'd see in the New York Times. Not perfect, but really 90% correct and actually verified and reviewed before they're released. When some effort was made to proclaim the truth, and it wasn't just a matter of the president spewing out complete garbage all the time that everybody knows is a lie. But this is a propaganda technique that came from Russia and has been very well perfected to spew so many lies out that everyone just gives up on the truth and says, well, everybody's corrupt, everybody's lying, so there's no point even figuring anything out. I'll just play video games and let anybody run the country. All right, and then there's information security stuff. Linux gains support for hardware-wrapped encryption keys, which I tried to read about and understand. It appears to be a technology used by hardware security devices, HSMs, and it sounds very much like trusted platform modules that are already in computers to me. Apparently, they're a somewhat different piece of hardware to do encryption for the processor. And the point is, it should resist cold boot attacks. Cold boot attacks break into BitLocker drive encryption and other drive encryptions. You when the machine is caught in a suspended state, not powered off, you freeze the RAM, read it on another machine, and you'll find the decryption key in the RAM. And this way, the decryption key is not anywhere in the RAM. It's in a special hardware device, which is not accessible to the processor and not easy to steal from. So it makes your machine more safely encrypted. Microsoft is going to do something about USB-C port confusion, which would be a really good idea. I was horrified to discover that USB-C cables are not all the same and the ports are not all the same. So you have to, and there's no marking on them to tell you what they can do. Some of them can properly deliver charge, others can't, and there are other limitations and differences between the cables. So they're changing the specifications for Windows 11 that to be a certified machine, all USB-C ports need to support data, charging, and display functionality. And boy, I would sure appreciate that. Um, I found it very confusing. I plug in a cable and it doesn't actually charge my machine. You have to figure out which cable and which port to put it in. And none of these things are obvious or marked anywhere. At the very least, you should mark there should be a color code for cables that can do charging, and there should be a mark or a color code on the device to show where to plug it in to charge the device. That would make a lot more sense than just having no indicator the way we do now. Um, so there's a thing getting some press that I think is pretty much nonsense, but it's the Darwin-Gödel machine, an AI that improves itself by rewriting its own code. So this stirs up fears of Skynet and the Terminator and everything, the artificial intelligence machine going amok. But it was designed to do this. It's not something a normal AI would do. They designed an AI to write some Python code and then run the Python code and then consider how well it was achieving something like winning a game or something, had some kind of goal, and then go back and rewrite the code to try to improve it and then measure it again. So they gave it a goal and they gave it the ability to rewrite the code to get there and had an algorithm. So it's not like an average machine learning algorithm is going to modify its own code. That's something you have to design into it. However, they did that, and then they found that sometimes it did hallucinate and hack its own reward function so that it moved from optimizing its performance at the supposed goal to doing some bizarre wrong thing instead. So anyway, If you design a machine like that, it can go out of control, but I really don't think you can generalize from that and say all LAIs are going to go out of control and kill us all. There's a new Linux flaw, which is kind of clever, that could leave you to steal password hashes. What happens is if an attacker can induce a crash, then a privileged process will dump the memory and then terminate. And if you then quickly create another process with the same process ID number, you can get access to that core dump that was created by the previous process using that process ID number. So that's pretty clever. And it doesn't sound like a huge risk to me, but it is an interesting exploit. All right. And so the Ukraine has built an electronic warfare wall, building a vast line of 85,000 jammers to jam drones, which is interesting and it might work. The other thing hitting a lot of news I'm reading about is their attack where they actually took out a bunch of U.S. Russian bombers, by smuggling trucks into the country full of drones that flew out the top and took down the bombers. So Ukraine is fighting back pretty effectively. And so China has put up a quantum communications network, or at least they started bidding it up, that's going to use quantum key distribution and lasers to send encrypted traffic from satellites. And hackers have found a weakness in this because the way that now, if you quantum key distribution, as done on Earth over fiber optics, involves sending very weak pulses of light, so they only have one photon carrying a couple bits of information. And then when you get it at the other end, when you verify that it was received correctly, you know that nobody in the middle measured it because the measurement in the middle would destroy the photon and some of the information in it. So it's very effective and protected by fundamental principles of physics. However, these satellites, for some reason, also use bright pulses as decoy pulses to distract interceptors, eavesdroppers, from figuring out which pulses they should be measuring to find the data. And I'm not quite sure why that's required, but that is what they do. And they found that they have multiple lasers. Some are the lasers actually sending the data, and some are the decoy lasers. And it turns out the timing is not exactly the same for those lasers. So the decoys can be different in time by as much as 300 picoseconds, and that is a detectable time difference. So you could, in principle, detect which ones are the decoys and remove them, and then focus on the ones to intercept, and they say that's a weakness and could lead to a compromise of the system. So that's interesting. Again, pretty exotic, sort of complicated, and unclear how effective it would be in practice, but it does show some defect in the system. There's an interesting video of a guy driving a Cybertruck, letting it self-drive while he plays Grand Theft Audio, screaming down the highway. So this kind of thing happens. People show off these things. Yeah, occasional videos like that. By the way, to be fair, I've also seen videos of bicyclists racing through downtown traffic in like New York City and San Francisco, missing trucks and cars and buses by inches, going through red lights and everything else. There's people that like to make these videos of them doing death-defying stunts on the road. Uh, Obviously a very bad idea. Anyway, there's a fun thing. They found out that exercise is more effective than drugs to prevent cancer recurring. Now, they did this with colon cancer and they did it with humans. They've had a whole bunch of humans. They gave them either a structured exercise regime with a personal trainer, and those people had a 37% lower risk of death and a 28% lower risk of recurrent cancer compared with people who received only health advice. And they say these percentages of improvement are as good as you get from drugs people take to prevent cancer coming back. So I like that. Something that's not too hard or expensive or difficult to do that would really help you. Um, so Canada has a national security problem. Obviously, they share a huge border with the United States, and the United States is now a hostile nation threatening to invade them and take them over under Donald Trump. So that's pretty much a nightmare for them. And on top of that, another huge problem is they buy their military hardware from the United States. And there are reports that if you buy an F-35 fighter jet from the United States, it has a kill switch so the United States can turn it off. So you can't use that military hardware against the United States, which is the number one threat to Canada, I would think, now that we are a hostile nation ruled by Nazis. So they're trying to figure out what to do. They have a big order of F-35s, and they haven't quite decided to cancel it yet, but logically, they probably should. Of course, the big question, as for the whole world, is whether Donald Trump will ever leave office or just stage a coup and stay in forever, which is certainly what he'll try to do. He tried it last time. And will he succeed? Will he just die? Will someone else take over like J.D. Vance to be the next Fuhrer? Or will we finally resume democracy in America or resume normal operation? You could argue that Trump got in through democracy. A bunch of misguided Americans actually did vote for him. But certainly if he stays in, that won't be through democracy. And anyway, uh, the whole world, I think, is watching with fear to see how long the Nazi regime in America lasts and whether we ever return to actually being a good player on the world stage again. And I don't know, I don't know quite how I would plan my defense. Canada can't reasonably afford to arm itself against the United States, really. I don't know what they can do. It's a big issue, boy, because we are a real threat, and I don't think they can possibly resist us. And trying to tool up to do it would be really expensive and disruptive. It would be awfully tempting to just try to ignore this and hope it goes away, because it's pretty likely that Trump will just go away. I don't know, but all the supporters are still out there, and they'll probably just fall for another stupid person. Anyway, um, so Meta plans to replace their risk analysis, a risk assessment team with AI. Up to 90% of all risk assessments will now be automated. And they say this is great. It'll be a win for product developers who will now be able to release app updates and features more quickly because the automated risk assessment will go really fast. So, uh, if it worked, that would actually be good. But my immediate thought is that the AI, everybody that's tried to replace a significant portion of their staff with AI has found it to be a disaster so far, and I bet this will be a disaster too. I bet the AI will not be as effective as a human at risk analysis, but I guess we're going to see. Um, and Meta and Yandex are de-anonymizing Android users. Now, the web browsers have been getting more and more concerned with your privacy. Remember, Google even pushed some alternative way of tracking users other than having cookies that know everything you've done, but they finally pulled that back under pressure from the advertisers. So anyway, they try to limit your ability to get tracking code, and it turns out that Meta and Russia's Yandex embed tracking codes into millions of websites, and they're de-anonymizing visitors by opening. Now, the browser itself limits how your cookie can be shared with another site. So that would be a protection of your privacy. But what they're doing is they're putting native code on the phones, Android phones, that are listening on a local network port, and they're sending messages from the browser to that network port to store them in another process outside the browser. So um, that bypasses the anonymity protection of the browser and lets them track people. So they can pass cookies and other identifiers into native apps, and they can then tie that vast browsing history to the account holder logged into the app. This is abuse. It's been observed only in Android, although perhaps it would be technically possible to do this on iOS, but they haven't apparently done it on iOS yet. If you use a privacy-focused browser like Brave on your Android phone, it currently mitigates this issue to some extent. The problem is, they say, they could just move it to another port and then we wouldn't detect it. So that's like antivirus engines that will stop a known virus, but all the virus maker has to do is modify the virus, and it'll be an arms race where the privacy-focused browser will have to keep changing their defenses as the people that want to invade your privacy change their attacks. But anyway, that would be one thing you can do right away if you're an Android user is use a privacy-focused browser that would help mitigate this. And they say the most comprehensive protection is to refrain from installing Facebook, Instagram, or Yandex apps on Android devices. But I think most people are not willing to accept that. I mean, if you love Facebook or something, you want to use Facebook. That's why you have your phone. You're not telling you to quit using Facebook on your phone is probably asking too much. I'd say using a privacy-focused browser might help. And maybe eventually Google will get pressured into actually outlawing this. All right. And so there's also big articles hitting the news. I mentioned before, Doge, when they took over government agencies illegally, they implanted basically malware on government systems and stole all the data, tunneling it out through the defenses in violation of security policies and law. And they're now being much more explicit about this. Ugh. Uh, The Palantir is Peter Thiel's group, named after, I think, a character from The Lord of the Rings that spied over the whole world. They were an espionage agency for the government, spying on everybody, building government big databases. So they're installing a Palantir product called Foundry into federal agencies. They've done it to 4 federal agencies so far, including the Department of Homeland Security and the Health and Human Services Department. And this will collect all the data from those agencies and send it to a central database, which the government can then use for whatever purpose they want. And people, there have been laws against this, and by the way, there still are laws against this, which they're just ignoring, um, for very good reason, because this goes back to Herbert Hoover in the FBI that had a secret reservoir of data, and he used it to blackmail and extort people all through the government. If you can tie all the government data together, and get a detailed dossier of everybody in America, then they could blackmail people, imprison their enemies, um, send people carefully crafted messages like they did with Cambridge Analytica to sway their votes and opinions on issues. Uh, you could also sell them products. You could hand off this data to companies to use for advertising purposes. You could do all sorts of things. In particular, of course, you could do things they really want to do, like catch all the immigrants, and you could target religious groups, which they probably want to target all Muslims. They probably want to target all immigrants, which is probably their immediate use of this data, and also form voter suppression. So, there's a lot of reasons why this is probably a really bad idea to create a unified government database. And there have been laws that prevented this, which they're just ignoring. But Palantir is in the business of providing the technical ability to do that. So that's this is very much like what happened in South Africa when IBM helped them make the complicated system of identity cards and records in South Africa before they ended apartheid. They divided the country into many ethnic groups, and they assigned certain regions of the country where each ethnic group could go. This is the system Elon Musk likes. Everyone is sorted into different racial groups, and then a racial group is assigned a certain location to be in, and they're not allowed to leave that location. This is what the Republican Party and Project 2025 and Curtis Yarvin want to do with America. They want everybody to be assigned to a town, and the town will be a company town, and you'll work at the company ruled by a local tech bro like Elon Musk or JD Vance will be your local tech bro, and he'll just determine everything about your life, where you're allowed to go, what you're allowed to own, what your pay is, what your working conditions are, what health care you get, if any, and all that will just be controlled by your local lord. That's what they think America should be. Shouldn't be a democracy with freedom like we have now. It should be everybody sorted into their little group and under control of their local warlord and staying in their place and not asking questions. That's what they want. And that's what the Republican voters voted for. Although I've argued with people about this online, I don't think the Republican voters understood what they were voting for. I think the decisive number of Republican voters believe propaganda, like the people that support Putin. They are unaware of the fact that they're voting against their own best interest. But I think they'll notice when they finish canceling Medicare and Medicaid and welfare and things like that. I think they'll begin to notice that this government isn't actually helping them. But maybe not. They might be able to distract them by talking about transgender people or some other nonsense that has no effect on anybody's life. By the way, I saw an interesting article that made me realize something I hadn't realized. It's actually a really good idea to let transgender women compete in high school sports because it makes them feel more accepted. And then they don't commit suicide. I hadn't thought of that, but that's a pretty good argument, in my opinion. And that came from the Republican governor of Utah. So there are occasional Republican figures that show glimmers of actual humanity and concern for people, I guess because they haven't gotten around to weeding them out of the party yet. But they're not all bad. They're just 99% bad. Anyway, uh, and by the way, Democrats aren't all good. Some of them are corrupt swine, but it's just there's no comparison between the two parties. I mean, it's like the difference between a C minus and an F. It's too bad that the best we get is C minus, but that's the best. Anyway, that's enough for this one, and I'll have another one of these things on Friday.